Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Tune into the madness on the airwaves. Dive into chaos where the wild ones rave. Common X bringing fire every day. Raise your voice, let the spirit sway. Legendary stories, whispers in the dark. Benny and the crew igniting sparks. From the underground we rise to the skies, unleashing truth in a world of lies. Common X screams breaking through the night. Open your mind, let your soul ignite. Ride the tempest, feel the power within. Common X, the journey begins.
Welcome to Common X Podcast with Jared and Ian, episode 19. We have a special guest today, William Becker. How you doing today, William?
Great. It's an honor to be here and great to see you too.
All right. Well, we're glad to have you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I do psychic medium work. I teach classes and give readings, as well as between life and past life readings. I don't do regressions. I'm not a hypnotist. And I've got a strong love of history. I have my bachelor's is in history. And so I combined the two as a way to help expand the world around me. And I like to help other people take advantage of their own abilities and be able to see and experience that which is beyond our normal senses.
Wow.
That sounds exciting.
Man.
Yeah, thank you.
So you perform like psychic readings, paranormal research, psychic mentoring, and education, correct?
Right. Mm-hmm. And I don't do much of the research anymore as far as investigations go. I'll go with the team when they want a medium, if they're people I know well and know I can work with well, and that they have honesty and integrity to the work they do. But once the entities don't want to talk to me anymore, it's like there's no reason for me to be there. I get bored. So
right.
I leave the science to other people.
Mm-hmm. So have you always been psychic? Like as a child, was that something that you discovered early on, or is that something that came later in life?
Well, I saw my first ghost when I was about 8, maybe 9. I think 8, though. It was another little boy. It was during the middle of the day. And I had a group of us were out in this other friend's neighborhood in Oregon City and saw this boy. They looked a little different and was kind of dressed a little different, but asked the friend who it was and if he could play with us. And the friend said, no, he's dead. And he gave me the name of the ghost, and he had died in the typhoid epidemic in 1913. It turns out he was famous. I found out, 50 years later that this was a very famous little ghost that people had been seeing for years and years. And so it was kind of cool. And so I've always been receptive, I think, but I didn't have any idea about mediumship or psychic work. And when you're a kid like that, I'm just kind of living and trying to fit in, and which didn't work for me in this town anyway.
Right.
And so I didn't pay much attention to it until I was in late high school, and probably around age 17 is when I started really working on abilities and exploring them. And then when I was at Oregon State, doing some more with that, I found some people to work with. And kind of kept going from there. So for about 51 years, I guess I've been honing my skills and exploring. Um, um, but it's hard to tell with some of the things that I would see or experience as a kid if it was imagination or metaphysical, simply because it was so long ago. And I just assumed, well, I assumed at the time it was real, but there could have been some power of suggestion. I don't know. Um,
Yeah, it's funny. I was just going to ask you that. Like, how do you distinguish between imagination and actual psychic perception?
okay. Now, as an adult, that's pretty easy.
Yeah.
Um, for one thing, I can tell which part of my brain is working,
Okay.
and that makes a difference. The way the messages or what I see comes to me makes a difference.
Hmm.
And I've got a big enough, long enough track record that has proven over and over that I'm good at what I do. Shoot, my old therapist she was one of the biggest pushes to get me to go professional. Um, and So, and for new people, a part of what I teach is you keep track, you write things down. How did you get it? What did it feel like? What's it look like? How does that differ from when you're using your imagination? How do the pieces feel? And in cases where you can actually track um, your accuracy, and often you can't, but sometimes you're able to see the news clipping after the fact or the picture after the fact, or people are picking up and seeing the same thing, or, that kind of thing. You
Hmm.
build up confidence over time over what's imagination and what isn't. And I take that a lot further now too. My own personal work is I'm doing more into metaphysical realms, working on in places where there are other kinds of beings and in to kind of a more universal conscious position. And it sounds very new wavy or new agey, and I don't mean it to. It's just um, part of my own growth. And I hope to have some books and maybe classes coming up exploring some of what I'm learning
Hmm.
after I get more of the picture and let it settle a little bit better. Make sure I know what I'm talking about. Um,
Okay. So, like, what kind of training or maybe practice goes into like honing your abilities? Is it just
um,
like continuing to do it, or?
Continuing to do it. Meditation is an important piece, especially early on, just because it helps us to be fully connected with ourselves. Um, we want to, oh, we want to um, have some guidance at first, I think is useful. I
Hmm.
had some on and off, and a lot of it was amateur, but, or, other people exploring, but also we had a friend of mine and I had somebody we met with weekly for a while in Corvallis of all places, and we had a meditation circle we called it, but we filled the house and her garden up with entities from all over. It was really pretty remarkable,
Also.
and that was something I could trust. And then just my own and friends that I would. One of my friends and I, we practiced psychic games together. I'd read his mother and he'd read my grandmother. Um, and, that kind of thing. But always with a foundation, a base where we could get feedback about how right or wrong we were.
Hmm.
And I started gravitating to other people with some abilities and um, just working. I took a little break for a little while in my 20s only because I was where I was working and a few of the things that were going on. I kept picking up unwanted entities kind of flitting around my apartment. There were a couple of people that were in work and different things, really nice people, but exploring things I didn't really understand. And none of it was evil or anything. It's just, I thought, I just don't want to deal with all of that right now. So until I understood better what was going on, I took a little break from that. And this was in the Portland Hills, and there are lots of entities there. I used to go to a friend's house, and I would walk from my apartment, and it was a bit of a walk and uphill, but it was good. And I quit walking at night because there were just too many people, too many other beings on the road and around that neighborhood. And so in the car, it was a little bit easier, and I still had a hitchhiker every time I left. You could see the smiling face in the rearview mirror. And so it always took me till I got home to get that person out of the car. And, like, no, this isn't for you. Actually, we had 3 of those in a flat I lived in San Francisco during the summer of '81. I went down there. A friend of mine was living there, and she knew about them too. And they were just watching and smiling and making sure everything's okay. So that was reassuring.
So is that kind of like a situation, like once they know you can see them or feel them, they kind of are like attracted to you?
Yes. My
Okay.
house can be a little like Grand Central Station sometimes. And my parents had the house built in the mid 90s, about 94, 95. It's in a subdivision. It was a field when I was a kid. Nobody's died in it, but my mom used to see things too out of the corner of her eye. And they're shadowy figures, they're faces that kind of appear around corners. I'll go to bed and hear voices and sometimes music in the living room. I don't get up to check and make sure nobody broke in anymore because I can tell which one is which. Footsteps, including on the roof, which is weird.
Yeah.
During the day, I understand they're birds and stuff, but I don't have any trees where critters could crawl up and get on my roof. And when it's 3 a.m. or 2 a.m, it's not a bird that's walking like a bipedal human.
Right.
And they don't cause any harm. They're welcome. So I've heard footsteps running down the street when nobody's been outside, and it's just kind of one of those neighborhoods.
Was there ever a time that you felt like maybe you doubted your ability? Did you ever have a period like that?
Oh yeah. I knew I had them, but what was real and what wasn't, and how accurate was I? And it took some pretty big experiences to really shake me and say, yeah, okay, I'm ready to go pro. One of those, I was with the team, and we were all good friends, and we were doing a road trip to a town on the southern Oregon coast for a client. And it was a great excuse for all of us to go out of town for a couple of days anyway. And we were 200 miles away or more, and I was reading this property and the layout in the backyard and all the rest of it. And we got there, and it fit exactly. There was, I think the event that finally pushed me into it, the pro though, was there's a site of the worst avalanche train disaster in the country. It's up by Snohomish Pass. And the town that was there, the railroad town, that wasn't wiped away, but it was the trains that were wiped away by an avalanche. And just right about 100 people died inside those trains. And I walked around. There weren't any. There are a few pieces left of, like a water tower, that kind of stuff. But there's nothing on the ground to indicate where the school or the church was, or where the hotel and cafe was, or houses, or anything like that. And I walked around with people that knew the area. In fact, a woman that wrote the history of the place, um, and described exactly what took place at all these different stops. And I was right on. And then we went down to where we scampered down the cliff to where the train had rested. And I was giving names and ages and occupations of people. And this author, Karen Fraser, in the back of her book, and I'd never seen her book. I knew she'd written one, but I wasn't allowed to have it or read it or do any research. And I got them all right. I mean, not all 100 of them, but I got everything that all the ones I had were right. The things I was picking up on the trail and all of that were the things other people had seen and experienced. And I was like, okay, yeah, this works. And this is pretty good evidence. And because that was a buildup after 35, 40 years or more, maybe 45 years of practice and work. It's not like that was my first experience. And that's when I knew I could really trust it. And you have to be aware that you could still be wrong. We can misinterpret, we can missee. So anytime you have a psychic that says they're always 100% right and accurate, run hard the other way.
Right. Yeah.
But,
Interesting.
So
yeah.
as a kid growing up, were your parents supportive or not really? Or
I didn't
did they
talk
think you
about
were
it.
odd? Oh, you just kept it from me. You didn't tell them at all?
I didn't tell anybody.
Interesting. Were you afraid
I
of
did,
them saying, like, making fun of you or thinking you were weird or what?
maybe, probably. And the little boy ghost was the biggest standout moment there. And I just knew better than to say much. My sister doesn't remember the incident. She was there, but she would have been, kindergarten maybe.
Yeah.
We weren't supposed to be running around this neighborhood. The oldest kid's mother was supposedly babysitting us, but she was passed out drunk on the couch at 1 p.m. So,
Lovely. Good babysitter.
yeah, she didn't ever babysit us again.
Yeah.
She was the wife of one of my dad's colleagues, and her 4 kids, and a good friend of mine, and my sister. We were all friends, and mom and another friend's that was there's mother were off canvassing for school budgets and school bond issues, and so that's why we were there to begin with. And so it was kind of amusing, but otherwise too, I didn't think about really talking about it too much.
Mm-hmm.
There was a time when I kept seeing something in the back. We had 6 acres, and there were some trees in the back part. And I kept seeing somebody dart between the trees. It was something all white. It makes me wonder now if it was a tree spirit or something, although it didn't look like the tree spirits I've seen, I don't think. It was a long, long time ago. Probably it was grade school. And I found out 5 years ago that my sister and a friend down the road had been pulling my leg about somebody hiding out in the woods. And so I think mom and dad were in one of their Reno trips or something that at that moment. One of my grandmas was staying with us, and I kept talking about the sky I kept seeing, and I was surprised that she was not paying any attention to it. And I guess my sister probably had told her what was going on. But I was
Mm-hmm.
seeing something. I don't think it was just power of suggestion, because I was seeing a white figure in the shape of a human, but thinner. Maybe not a stick person, but thinner and all white. So I would have thought it was, if it was suggestion, I would see somebody with a face and skin color and all that.
Right.
So
Something more human that you were used to seeing every day.
yeah, and I found out that the neighbor three houses down, um, they had all kinds of activity in the old house he grew up in. It was back part of the original homestead. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Even things outside, like there'd be a tree always blowing in the wind when there was no wind, and nothing else was blowing. Um, and so it was kind of a unique area that way, I think. It'd be kind of fun to get a better history of just who and what owned that property when.
Right.
So, but nothing in the house we lived in.
So you've been doing this for quite a while. So what's the most compelling paranormal experience that you've ever had?
Oh, geez. That's a hard one. I think the most moving one I had was in Russia. My family on my dad's side were Volga Germans, and my grandparents came over in 1912 with every intent of going back to the big family farms and wealth once the Tsar got everything under control.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we know how well that worked,
Right.
and they didn't go back, and none of the wealth came here. Um, Grandma went from having maids to working in people's houses. Um,
Right.
she was always a hard worker, though, anyway, and worked on the farms. But I, we were a bunch of us cousins took a tour to the area that was being put on specifically for Volga Germans. And we got to Grandma's village and Grandpa's village. And Grandma had made a map with somebody. And so we went to where her house had stood, the one her father had built, and to her father's house, and her mother's father's house, my grandfather's father's house, and a lot of those. But then in the school, I saw her as a little girl coming down the stairs, and then older, and then more as how I remember her. And because I was in my 20s when she passed, and she and I had a really good conversation. And part of it was about my grandfather's truly evil, wicked stepmother. I mean, Hansel and Gretel and the Wicked Queen and Snow White are no match for this person. And
Wow.
yeah, she was bad. And I'd called her out at Grandpa's father's house, and she came flying out the house at me. And Grandma had always been highly critical, shall we say, of this person.
Mm-hmm.
She was brutal to my grandmother, too. Um, but when I was talking to Grandma about that experience, she said to me, imagine how hard her life must have been for her to be that way. And that was totally unlike my grandmother when she was living here. And
Mm-hmm.
just that whole experience and making it right. I was on my way up to a presentation about us all in the town. And, I walk in the room with tears streaming down my eyes. But and I've got that out. That whole trip is in a book I wrote, in the footsteps of our forebears. It's on. You can get links to it off of my webpage.
Awesome. Yeah,
Paranormal.
we'll link it. in the
Pardon me?
description on this. We'll link it in the description on this podcast too,
Great, thank you.
so people can check it out.
Yeah. And so I think that's probably the most moving one. Any more? There have been so many, it's really hard to say this was the most profound, as in a shake-up experience or something.
Yeah, so I guess my next question is, have you ever had one that has scared you so much? Like, and how did you handle that?
Okay. There were earlier on when I didn't understand things and didn't understand my own ability and power as much. I could be, um, I could be um, concerned by something that would present as dark and evil. And I'm trying to think. Well, a friend of mine and I were called to go to an investigation in a place that it turned out had a ninth order demonic priest or Satanist priest or something. And the people were kind of strange. And there was an energy there that was kind of off.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't totally frighten me, but it was unsettling. And so one part of what I do is put up some protection. And I did that, and it was okay. And when I think about it, with what I know now and where I am now, it wouldn't have bothered me. Um, and do, do you have something behind you? I keep seeing.
Yeah, I think the TV's back there.
Oh, okay. It looks kind of like a corner, but I kept seeing these lights and colors and stuff, and I'm going, okay, let's check and see what this is. Sorry about that, guys.
Don't worry.
ADHD brain.
If there's any evil spirits or something behind me, I appreciate you looking out.
Yeah. I don't think evil spirits exist. There are non-human
Really?
spirits. There are some that try to be tough guys. There are some that aren't very nice. I had one that tried to be the big, scare everybody, evil presence type thing. In Salem, I was doing an investigation with some people, and I just looked at it and said, "Oh, come on, really?" And it sulked away, and because it knew it couldn't do anything to me. It knew I knew that, and it knew I didn't want to do anything to it. So, it was just you get living people that are bullies, you get beings that are bullies in other realms and another, that are past too. So, and just not letting them get away with it pretty much is enough. I've had some experiences a couple times where it was a little unnerving until I could see what was there and hear what they were having to say, just because of the strength of the energy. But then it was fine. And some of that is in my first book. But so I don't have anything I can really think of much that way.
Okay. So do you believe these are like spirits of people that have passed and their spirits are just hanging out? Or is it like a residual energy of that person? I guess, and kind of leading into that, do you believe in like heaven and hell?
Okay. Do I believe in heaven and hell? No. That's
Okay.
not what my experience shows me. Actually, that's not what my understanding of theology shows me.
Mm-hmm.
And what I see is a reincarnation process that we learn and grow to become our full, unique, complete self. I think it was Plato. I get my Greek philosophers mixed up. But the idea of a telos and the acorn, every individual acorn grows into its own unique tree. And we continue lives to become part of our own unique tree. And then when we reach that, we can join more of a universal awareness being. It's something we're part of anyway, but then we can just kind of go there. Between lives, we heal. Life on this planet can be brutal in the best of times. We have a group usually that's supportive, and we can make a lot of choices. And so my readings, doing between lives, and even doing readings of people who have committed suicide, have been that there's love and peace and joy and healing once we pass, no matter how or why. Now, some of the beings that are here, and I use being instead of ghost or spirit because there are just so many different things. I like to be kind of generic in that, because I don't necessarily agree or disagree with some of the labels, and I just don't like to label things if I don't have to.
Right.
But some of them come to visit, and they'll send down parts of their spirit or their soul, or to various degrees. Some of it's the energy we leave behind that can interact and has consciousness. And that's often the type of an experience that shows how the person was when they were alive. And in that particular area. And the ones that come to visit us where that energy is from them moving on is the person that's healed a bit and is wiser. I can tell the difference if I'm getting something from my folks. I can tell the difference between, okay, yes, this is their energy, how they were here, and, oh, okay, this is them coming as sending some of their soul to be around and help or whatever, because what they're saying, what the energy's like is very different. Am I answering the question?
Yeah, I think so. Like,
Okay.
so you believe in kind of like we all belong to kind of like a source energy, maybe,
That could
and
be
we're
one.
working to get back to it, or
Yeah, I
working
think a
to
source
evolve ourselves
consciousness.
as beings.
Pardon me?
Working to evolve ourselves as beings, maybe.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think science today is, proving that there are multiple dimensions. So, I think, there's probably some places on Earth where that connection to those different universes is probably a lot thinner. And you could get different spirits or different entities from different places.
Yeah, and I don't know if they need the thinner or not. I know that's one of the things that are put out there in certain times of the year. And I'm not saying that isn't true. I just don't know, because I'm able to pretty well get through to them no matter where. If they want to talk to me. I mean, they don't all want to talk to me.
Right.
And that's okay. I can be a bit of a challenge and a handful. I don't always want to talk to me.
So have you ever received warning from like a being that's passed about someone who's currently living?
I've had a few times working with a client where the person that's coming through for them is saying, go to the doctor. There's something with this one woman, the right side of the head. And she took the advice and went, and there was something that I don't remember the details, but it was fairly simple to take care of at the time. But if she would have waited until it got really bad, it would have been much more difficult. I think it was something that could have turned into a sepsis abscess or something with the mouth. But and so there have been cases like that. I've had times where the loved ones are saying, you need to do this, work on this, put your time and energy into this. And it's usually something that's a skill set the person really enjoys, but hasn't believed enough in themselves to do, or hasn't made time for, or whatever. And something that could often become part of of a career path. So good questions, both you guys. If I don't answer them, tell me.
So have you ever asked or been asked by anybody to help with like a negative or dark entity that's around them and like help you get rid of them or anything like that?
Yeah, especially within houses and stuff. And
Mhm.
I have never known a clearing to work. I've watched entities laugh at the mediums who say, okay, they're all gone now. And then
Right.
hear
This
back
house is
from,
clean.
yeah, and then
Yeah.
hear back from the homeowner 3 days later and say, guess what? Thanks, folks. It's a lot worse. But what I find is that you can usually make a deal. I've worked with people a few times that wanted me to get rid of them, and that's not my job. I don't know that we even have the right. It's their spot first.
Right.
And all the rest of it. So, and I don't believe that trapped souls exist. It's just not my experience. I have to have experience before I can say something exists.
Hmm.
And so I I find that by helping homeowners or people set ground rules and then sticking with the ground rules, you can't make exceptions. They're happy to have the entities stay because they no longer bother them. I can tell them what it is they're wanting or what's going on. So much fear comes from not knowing. And once
Right.
they know, so much of that fear goes away. And once they know they can set and maintain ground rules, then everything works well. And if people have something that's really nasty energy wise, they feel is creating trauma and that kind of thing in a house, I suggest look at what kind of emotions are the people bringing into the house, what's being watched on TV. I suggest people open the curtains. Yellow is a color I always see that I suggest bringing in flowers, something, just to bring bright and more of a loving light energy in. Keep
Hmm.
the scary shows off. Any disagreements or arguments or anger, take it outside and just have the positive energy in the house. And either those beings that feed off the negative and then create more negativity so they feed better will go away, or if they are shaped by the energy that they're feeding off of, they'll become a positive energy instead of a negative one. And that usually works. It just
So
takes a little.
do you think like religion has confused this and made it more scarier than it should be?
I think so.
Okay.
I do think so. especially more modern. If you go back even to the 15th century, 1400s, and even a little later, what we call the paranormal was just part of life and pretty normal. But we have really compartmentalized death. We don't want to integrate it into life. We don't like to talk about it. And so it's partly religion, I think, but also partly the culture that's developed in this country and probably in Western Europe to a degree.
I would imagine
And
that's made worse by Hollywood.
yes,
These demons are coming for your soul.
yes. Hey, it sells.
Yeah.
The thing that gets me is when you have programs where everything's a demon or possessed or whatever, it's like, okay, that's great. It boosts sales, but put something big on it. Entertainment only. This isn't real, so people don't believe this stuff. But critical thinking skills are something we need to work on in this culture.
Yes, they are. And all right, you brought up the P word. So you think people can be possessed by entities, or do you think it's just kind of all in their head?
I haven't ever had an experience where people are possessed.
Okay.
Now, saying that, you hear of things. I think entities can go inside of us.
Mm-hmm.
It's happened to me. I know a couple of trance mediums, but that's not possession. If it happens, it's incredibly rare. I know the Catholic Church has a battery of psychological tests and all kinds of other things that they insist on before they'll even consider a case as possible.
Right.
I think a lot of what we get, a lot of people need to be special and important and feel that way. And like they can do things that nobody else can do. And they have special talents nobody else has. And I get that. I'm not criticizing it. I'm not criticizing anybody. But I think in so many of these cases, it's basically people's egos needing to help and say they're helping and healing. I'm not going to say that's all the cases. I'm not going to say there's something I don't know. But my experience is it doesn't really happen. And you'll get lots of people disagreeing with me, and that's okay. But
So, all right, how do you just respond to like skeptics or say this is all a bunch of hoo-ha? Psychic abilities aren't a thing. There's no such thing as
right.
ghosts, things like that. How do you respond to skeptics?
Actually, that brings up a funny story. I went on a cruise with a friend of mine a few years ago up to Alaska, and that's somebody who doesn't believe in this stuff and is just total poo-poo, the whole thing. And all these doctors and engineers and college professors and lawyers and television studio hotshots and all these people were fascinated by what I do and were giving me the attention, with what I was talking about instead of this friend of mine who's the engineer. And it kind of irked him, but that's okay. I thought it was funny. But I tell people up front, I don't expect people to believe me just because I say so. I'm speaking from experience, and I believe in the things I believe in because I've had personal, physical, visual experiences, audio experiences, all kinds of things like that. But I'm very much a doubter and a skeptic myself. And I've had the experiences that I cannot find a way to explain any other way. And, when you pick up something and off the sofa and there's a 10 kopeck Russian coin on the sofa and it wasn't there when the items were put down, that was grandma. But when your chair gets moved for you, or things turn on, or doors with no draft slowly close, or you wake up in the morning and all the drawers and cupboards and stuff in your hotel room are open, or somebody sits on the bed next to you and you feel it, or you watch the door in your hotel room get unlocked. The bolt part from the inside. It's not like a key from somebody on the outside. Oh, and just so many more things. And as well as the visual apparition, middle of the day, no trick of the eye, and they're there and they're not. And I always look, is there something that could have made this happen? Is there some trick? No. But I understand people have to have those experiences before they can believe it. So I don't get into it with them. That's not my job.
Yeah.
People that are interested in what I have to say, I'm happy to talk. If they aren't interested or just want to tear it down, it's not worth it. And I haven't had much experience with people being too negative.
So based on your knowledge and experience, given what you do you have any bold predictions to the future? For the future?
For the future?
Yeah.
Okay. Now there are a couple of things. The future can always change. I can see things, and I don't give future readings, in part because it can change. And I don't want people to make a major life decision based on something that I say that way that changes, and then it was a wrong decision. And there are too many things that in a future reading that I could screw up. So that's just part of my do no harm philosophy. But for over a year now, and I don't like to get political with my work, but I have seen ruin and like the negative of a photograph where it's grays and silvers, but kind of the intensity of a twilight, and often lots of red thrown in it. It's not a pretty picture. I see that manifesting. Can that change? Yes, I still have some hope that it could change. And part of what I'm doing is just my own sense and working with what I can put into the metaphysical as a way of helping to change that energy to a degree. I've been rather terrified, to tell the truth, in a lot of things. But we'll see what happens. And again, I don't like to get political in these things. But you asked, so.
Right. Almost sounds like a rapture, possibly.
I don't know about that because I don't particularly see that as an actual happening. There's a biblical scholar I follow on YouTube, Dan McClellan, and his PhD is in it's a critical analysis ability of theology, and he knows the different languages, and he knows he's quite brilliant, and he talks about so many misconceptions in Scripture. And I think, if my memory right, that's when he's talked about the idea of the rapture and how it really doesn't mean that. It has to do with the thinking of the time for that moment and people that were not expecting to be around very long because Christ was going to be there in their lifetimes. And so maybe a little bit more like Armageddon. that,
Oh, wow.
but I mean, just because of the violence, the destruction, the incredible suffering and poverty that entails or ensues, except for very few people.
Yeah, it seems to be kind of like an all-time high. Like, we're definitely more divided than united.
Oh, yeah. And I don't like to. It's very difficult to keep my own balance and keep a healthy perspective and attitude. So I started therapy again.
Yeah. I've thought about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny, you know, like I think I've told you this. Like I've had experiences before. We used to live in a house where I think one night I was sitting watching TV. My two kids at the time were, and I think they were like 3 and 4,
Uh-huh.
and they were in bed, supposedly. And I hear like this giggling and running down the hallway upstairs. And I'm like, you guys better get in bed. Like, go back to sleep. So I just kind of leave it. A couple minutes later, I hear it again. I'm like, all right, I'm coming up. Who's out of bed? I get up there, and both boys are out cold. Like there's no way. They were just the ones running around.
Right.
And you know, my wife is pretty in tune to spirits as well. And
Right.
in this place, you know, there was a little girl that was a spirit in there, and she would sometimes play like in the hallways down there. And then
Uh-huh.
she'd said she'd seen like a man standing in like some corners every now and then, just like out of the corner of her eye.
Right.
And then sometimes we'd come down to the kitchen and all the cabinet doors were open in the kitchen. You know, I
Mhm.
didn't do it. She didn't do it. My kids couldn't reach. So
Right.
yeah, I'm definitely
Yeah.
a believer.
Yeah. Well, did I read that location? Because I
I
think
don't think so.
because I have a memory of hearing from you guys a little bit about that, but I'm not sure. I mean, it's been a while. You
Yeah,
guys
it's been a
left
while.
town.
Right. Yeah, I don't think we ever actually had you over to that
I
location
didn't
before
ever
we
go over,
moved.
but I think
Yeah.
I can't remember if I picked up on things while you were sharing about it or not.
Yeah.
Because I read things remotely all the time.
Yeah.
But
And I think Ian, your wife had experience, right, with a house that they used to live in.
She did. She did growing up. She saw all kinds of weird stuff. Um, yeah, I think her and her parents had a trippy house like that one time.
uh, um, once you get to know it and what's around, it can be pretty cool. Um, as long as you can set realistic ground rules.
Yeah. All right. So these ghost hunting shows on like Discovery and stuff, you think they get things right, or is it more often they get things wrong? Or is it just for entertainment purposes?
I think they're pretty much for entertainment. Now, that said, I know one of the people that was on one of the shows is a good friend of mine, and I have nothing but the highest regard for his integrity and honesty.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of the shows that often would say, we didn't find any evidence.
Right.
And it was one I liked. And anything that's on commercial television has one purpose, and that's to make money for the shareholders, the production companies, all the rest of it. Truth is secondary to the story. Demons sell, possessions
Mhm.
sell. It's the big gotcha headline type thing. If there's a program where there's an awful lot of that, I'm very suspicious. And no matter what the intent of the investigators or the actors or the mediums or whatever, they're not the ones doing the final cut and putting together the story on TV.
Right.
So I don't like to really be critical of people or a platform. I just encourage people to realize, and not just with ghost stories, but any kind of a thing where it's on commercial television, the purpose is to make money.
Mhm.
And that can affect the presentation and what is presented. And I wish people were more aware of it when they think what they see is the way to do investigations or the only way, or, that kind of thing, because there's so much more out there that makes it more real. And don't go out if all you're looking for is shits and giggles. Find something else to do as far as investigating or whatever, because you're dealing with human beings and other kind of beings. And they deserve as much respect as or anybody else. And I've had groups in haunted locations where I've held classes say to me, and I've tried to be very respectful, but this happened at the Walker Ames once or twice when I did classes. We aren't circus animals. We don't perform on command.
Right. We're not for your
And
entertainment.
yeah. And so that's kind of where I am with that. And I hope people would think a little bit more and play a fantasy game if you want all the rest of it, or go scare yourselves in the dark or something, but don't be rude to other beings.
So I guess if someone today thought they were psychic or seeing things, what would you say to them? Like, believe in yourself, go get help, seek things.
um, Now it depends on what's going on. Um, there have been times with clients that I've suggested and I'm very clear. I have a bachelor's in history, a master's in public administration. In no way am I qualified as a lawyer, as a physician, as a mental health therapist, as
Right.
a drug counselor, or anything else. But I have often encouraged people to go and see a doctor and look at, just because the way they were talking and what they were saying didn't sound as accurate to me as it might be. And it's good to double check health, because there are all kinds of things that can create hallucinations and such without doing drugs to particularly do it. You might have radon gas or carbon monoxide leaking in your house, and that can send you into all kinds of places.
Right.
That doesn't mean everybody I've told that to, I'm suspect of them, but I tell them, keep track, get validation for real, for what it is. Realize that to really develop your skills takes years. Don't take one class from me or a series and then want to know how much you should charge as a professional. Those are the people that give us a bad name, among others. And so, yeah, work on it. I suggest working with somebody you can trust, or at least another friend doing the research. I suggest not doing it when you're dealing with psychic work in an occult type of a way where your mindset can be more negative. Not that necessarily what you think you're calling is real, but you can influence just by your own emotions and thought patterns what's going on and how whoever you're talking to responds to you or doesn't. So it pretty much depends on the individual, because everybody's different. And I love teaching. If I can make it pay for itself and a little extra for me, I'm willing to take classes anywhere. And then I can also do them on Zoom and Skype and all kinds of stuff like that. But yeah. In fact, all of you overseas, my passport's current and up to date, and it's just looking for some plane fare.
Right. Some new
So,
travel over to Europe.
yeah, put together a good, a gig or a series of that will pay the bills in a little bit. I'm there as fast as we can get the tickets.
Have you ever looked at doing like a Udemy course? Like a
A what?
online, it's like an online training location. Like you can learn AI, programming, business, all kinds of things like that. Have you ever thought about putting a course like that together and putting it on a platform like that that people could consume?
I didn't know that you could do that. I hadn't thought of it.
Maybe you and I should get together after this and talk about it.
Yeah, we need to talk about that soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that sounds interesting.
Yep.
Mhm.
Reach a bigger audience, I think, too.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
And I feel good about the work I do.
Hmm.
My feedback has always been very positive. Um, I'm quite confident in my abilities, but I'm also skeptical. I really pay attention. Um, and so I I love it. That's a really good idea. And I've been looking at trying to put together some online stuff.
Hmm.
All right, well, you heard it here first on Common X. William's ready to travel, do some teachings.
Yeah.
We're at the portion of our show where Jared asks his five. Jared's five. And the cool things about this is some of those are personal to you, and some of these questions are, well, they pertain to the next guest, but nobody knows who the next guest is. The clues I can give you are is we do have a next guest, and yeah, let's see how this plays out. Go ahead, Jared.
Hopefully, we have lots of next guests, but we'll see.
Oh yeah, we will.
All right, so
And
I put together a list of 5 questions, and one of them is a question you would ask the next guest, right? So our last guest was Sid Griffin, and he's like
Your last guest was who?
his name was Sid Griffin. He's kind of the what do you say, like the founding father of the Americana music movement.
Okay.
yeah, alt country.
Yeah,
Mhm.
alt country, Americana. And his
Fantastic.
question, and honestly, you kind of already answered it, but I'll ask it anyway. Are you happy with what you've done in your work and in your life?
I am happy with what I have done in metaphysical work. In my life as a whole, some of it yes, some of it no. If I would have known then what I knew now,
Right.
you know, um, I would have taken a very different path in the earlier years of actual career and focus in building that kind of thing than I did. And had a better stability at this point in my life, and even more travel.
Yeah. All right. Next question. What is your favorite movie of all time?
Oh, geez. It depends on my mood. Brother,
Is there
Sun,
one you keep
Sister
going back
Moon.
to?
Brother, Sun, Sister Moon was a good one. Hair was a good one. Notice how old those are. I'm not sure. I'm not really sure.
All right. Did you watch cartoons as a kid?
Yes.
What was your favorite cartoon?
Let's see. Bullwinkle. Oh, depends on how old I was and stuff too.
Mhm.
Popeye. Um, Mickey Mouse and that group.
Okay.
That kind along that genre
Mhm.
a lot.
All right. Next one. What's one thing that you think people should know about you that maybe they don't already?
Maybe I'm not always as nice as I look.
It's a good one.
That's a good one. All right. What advice would you give your teenage self today?
Look into ADHD.
Mhm.
That just wasn't that much of a thing, and everybody was thought to outgrow it, and it was never even brought up or thought about with me. And it
Right.
sure would have helped if I would have known what was going on. And I was a good student all through 1 through 12
Mhm.
and through graduate school. Undergraduate school, it depended on the class and how focused I could get on it. And believe in yourself. Don't believe
Awesome.
the naysayers. Believe in yourself.
Mhm. All right. And then last question. What's the next question you want our next guest to answer? Can be anything.
What motivates you and makes you thrive?
Awesome. Well, thank you, William.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, man. You've been an awesome guest. Thanks for joining us, guys, on Common X Podcast with Jared and Ian, episode 19, and our special guest, William Becker. Have a nice day, guys.
That's weird. My record controls have disappeared. Where'd they go? How do I
I'm
stop
glad
the
I'm not the
thing?
only one that has trouble with that stuff.
Oh, there they are. Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in today to the podcast, Common X with Jared and Ian. We really appreciate you guys and would love your support. So make sure you click that subscribe or like button or follow us on all our social media platforms and on YouTube and Spotify, because that would really help us out. And that helps us bring more episodes to you guys every week, and hopefully from content that you guys want to see. So reach out, TikTok, YouTube, leave comments. If there's anything that you guys want to see or any guests that you want us to try and get on, let us know. We do have a good lineup coming. So thank you again. We love you guys. Thanks for your support, and we'll see you next time. And remember, common sense isn't that common. So that's why we're bringing common sense back from Generation X.